Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us today. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Jason is engineering the broadcast today in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen to USA Prepares on your telephone, 605-562-6564. 605-562-6564. And from all reports that I've gotten, that is the best listen line, and it is up and running 24/7 without delay. Today we're going to talk about energy transformation. Dr. Tim Schoechle is with us. And here are the topics. Clean coal, nuclear power, 130 years of centralized power, the big grid, hydro generation, power transmission, solar, and batteries, and how they're going local. And is that true? Yeah, it's true. It's right here on the farm. We're broadcasting via solar right now. And the new energy that we're going to see. Welcome, Dr. Tim Schoechle.
Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning. So, as I was describing what we're going to be talking about, it reminded me of a little story. And so I was at this convention, and it was in Springfield, Missouri, and there were representatives from all kinds of companies. And the electric cooperatives were being represented there. So I went up to this one guy who was dressed very nicely behind the booth, and I said to him, in the booth behind the table in front of the booth, I said to him, wow, so you represent the electric cooperatives? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'd love to have you on the radio with me. And I'd like to talk about energy. And, as I drive down the road, as I travel, I see homes that are very, very modest. As a matter of fact, these are homes that people look like they're going to lose them very, very soon because they're unkempt. But there's a common thread here, and I see the porch light, the 100-watt light bulb, running day and night. And I have a feeling that some of us are going to end up paying that guy's electric bill. And he's not alone. There are a whole bunch of them like that in rural Missouri. So what I'd like to talk about with you on the air, if you would consider doing this, is how we can conserve electricity, how we can stop wasting electricity, like in that example that I just gave. The guy turned to me and he said, we're not in the conservation business. We sell electricity. He had no interest in teaching people how to conserve electricity. And that's coming from a representative at a very high level of the electric cooperatives that are scattered all over Missouri. It's an outrage. It offended me. I couldn't believe it. Do you have a reaction to that, Dr. Schoechle?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. The electricity as a commodity, selling a commodity is their job, the power companies that were formed, and when we started using electricity, it was treated as a commodity. The more kilowatt hours you sell, the more money you make as the utility. And transformation we're going to talk about is the transformation from where the electricity is the commodity to the transformation to where the equipment is the commodity and the electricity is no longer a commodity.
Wow, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So where do you want to start with this?
Well, I had thought we might say, some of the things in the news that bring this to our attention is making money off of electricity as a commodity and the generation and distribution of it. An example is the whole move that we've seen recently toward what they call clean coal or nuclear power, and the recent decision last week, I guess it was, by the Federal Energy Regulatory Agency, FERC, to deny subsidies for 2 nuclear power plants on the East Coast in Georgia, I think, in South Carolina. The utilities there invested over $10 billion each in those, in the combination with the Westinghouse, which was owned by the Japanese, and it's nearly caused a bankruptcy of the Japanese company Toshiba that bought Westinghouse. And these $10 billion nukes are basically obsolete, and they can't produce power at anywhere near the cost of any other source today. But they were built around this idea of a high price for selling kilowatt hours, and in addition to that, a cost recovery of the cost of building the plant and the profit on that, about a 10% profit by investor-owned utilities and others that are allowed by regulators to be all billed to the users, to the ratepayers, and that was a big money machine for over a century. But all of a sudden, it's drying up because why? Because of the cheaper cost. The cost has dropped so fast, especially with wind and solar energy, but also natural gas and things like that. The price won't support either coal or nuclear power anymore. They're just too expensive, and aside from any environmental issues. So anyway, that's the way we could start. But what I wanted to say was, how did we get here? Why do we have a system like that? Well, there was a good reason. We have only been using electricity for about 130 years. I mean, the electricity was essentially created, or the idea, the generation and practical use of electricity was introduced in the late or mid 1890s, and some of the first power plants were built then, and it really got to going around the turn of the century, mostly in cities, urban areas, there were many power companies, and they all strung their wires all over the cities, but nobody built them out in the country because it was just too expensive. I mean, it's a hugely expensive project to build the power plants, and the steam plants of the time, or early hydro plants, were too expensive for. They were hugely expensive. So the system was created to basically get rid of the competition. The industry and the Edison companies, mainly Chicago Edison, initiated this idea in 1907, to consolidate and be able to buy up all these competitive little power companies and combine them into one monopoly that would then be regulated by state regulators. And between 1907 and the end of, let's say, 1920s, you had all the states adopted this approach and allowed and set up regulatory agencies. And even today, 60% of the electricity is produced by these investor-owned utilities, but there are also municipal utilities and co-ops that you mentioned before, the rural electric co-ops, and which are nonprofits, but nevertheless operate under the same economic model. They can produce power more cheaply, but because they don't have to pay a profit to shareholders, but they all use the same technology, and basically it was coal-based and some hydro early on, but the hydro I'll talk about in a minute. But the early days was based on commodity sale of electricity per kilowatt hour, and the recovery of the capital costs at 10% profit. that was the economic model that was developed in the early 1900s and prevailed until just now.
And what did you say was the least expensive method of power generation? Is it coal, nuclear, hydro, solar, gas? Natural gas, fuel oil.
You mean today?
Yes, today. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, today. Well, that's real interesting because just in the last couple of years, wind and solar have dropped below the cost of any other source of generation, and they're even with natural gas. The cheapest is is wind and natural gas at about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Those are the figures used by that I've seen just in the last week for bid proposals that were given to our local utility. Wind is at 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and solar at 3, and solar plus storage at 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and natural gas around 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour. It varies all the time. So that's the cheapest source of electricity, and nuclear is maybe 5 times higher.
Wow. And I remember, believe it or not, Isaac Asimov was one of my instructors very, very early in my formal schooling, very, very early. And I still have this booklet that I got in that class. It was in elementary school, and it was about the power of the atom, and the atom is our friend, and that kind of thing. And he was saying in class that in the future, electricity, nuclear-powered electricity, will be so inexpensive, like pennies a day. And we'll be able to heat our homes, heat our hot water, wash our clothes. It'll power industry. It'll be everywhere. Almost free, very, very safe, nothing to worry about. This stuff is great. That's what we learned. And it didn't turn out to be that way. It didn't. But, and I've got a lot of concerns about nuclear power. And maybe that'll come up as you describe more about electricity as we go through this class. Dr. Tim Schoechle is with us. Yeah, we'll be right back. Dr. Schoechle is saying a lot of things that I absolutely, positively agree with. And I presented to our electric cooperative the thought that I believe just an off the top of my head calculation, I thought we could provide solar power. Farmers who have some land and have solar arrays, we could provide power back to our utility at about 2 to 2.5 cents per kilowatt. That was my guesstimation or back of the envelope calculation. And I'm glad to hear that was pretty close. But, I was kind of laughed at. Like, that's ridiculous. Why do that? Because you're absolutely right. The electric cooperative that I ran for the board of directors for is entrenched in the old model. And how much were they paying? Our electric cooperative was paying 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And they were not interested in paying half that much. Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Well, I mean, if they're selling a commodity, they get to charge the users 8 to 12 cents or 15 cents, depends on where. In Hawaii, they were doing it off of diesel fuel and charging 45 cents. Wow. And yeah, they could have that what appears to be a small profit on the service. And I guess I'm confused because when I was in banking, they would talk about products, and I couldn't understand how they could call a credit card a product, how they could call a savings account a product. But I guess maybe in that light, electricity would be a product. But what I don't understand is all of the guys who work there have nice, clean uniforms. The building is like the Taj Mahal. The trucks are brand new. And the electricity rates keep going up. So it looks to me like they're spending money on themselves, and then they're saying, and we need a 10% profit. It doesn't look to me like they're trying to save money at all. I mean, that's clear to me. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Please continue, Dr. Schoechle.
Yeah. That's exactly the case. It kind of grew up over 100 years, a tradition, and and they provided reliable power. So that's that. And what they did, the biggest transition was the introduction of the hydro and transmission. In the early days, it was confined to cities, and pretty much because that was the economics. They couldn't make any money running rural electric. So the farmers basically had to use kerosene or candles or something like that. But it also encouraged the development of windmills and farms. There was a company called Aero Motor there were hundreds of thousands of those, and a lot of them still probably around you.
Yes, I found one that I want. I found one that I wanted to buy for $1,250. It had a 40-foot tower.
Well, they're incredibly reliable, and they used for pumping water. And the farms, they developed these devices. When they introduced radio, of course, farmers wanted to be able to, and the rural people wanted to be able to get in their news. So it was a company called Delco that developed these devices called Delco units, which were little generators and batteries. And they were very popular because they allowed people their concern was running their radio, not so much the lights, but then later lights became more important. But anyway, that's just an interesting historical side note. But during the 1930s, when there was a depression, there was a major program, the Works Progress Administration, and a major push by the federal government to do these major projects, particularly building dams in the West, big hydro dams in the Northwest, and because there was a lot of rivers that could be dammed up and a lot of electricity that could be generated. So they built the Grand Coulee Dam. That's probably one of the most famous ones. And they built, of course, then they had to build transmission lines to link those. And so then they developed the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they built a lot of dams in that area, and they built a lot of dams in the Pacific Northwest, and they built a lot of transmission lines. And they got to get their 10% profit on the transmission lines, too. So that became very popular. So
when we come back, we're going to talk more about electricity and the transformation of electricity. And it looks like there are a few of us out here who who want to decentralize electricity transmission and generation. Dr. Tim Schoechle, and I'll be right back. Dr. Tim Schoechle is with us, and Dr. Schoechle said something quite fascinating to me. My understanding was that George Westinghouse was a proponent of AC, alternating current. Thomas Edison was a proponent of DC, direct current. And Edison was saying that direct current was much safer, and he was shocking elephants and killing them with the kind of current that George Westinghouse was advocating. But Westinghouse won because of the electric motor. It was more efficient, and the power distribution was more efficient with alternating current because you could ship it farther with less loss than DC. But Edison said, well, we can just build a power station, every mile. And that was Edison's answer. Use DC and just have these power stations every mile. But then again, you mentioned Consolidated Edison. Well, Consolidated Edison bought up the power distribution, the small power distribution companies and generators, and consolidated them. And in New York City right now, the electric company is called Con Ed, Consolidated Edison, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting story, and there's books written on that. They called it the War of the Currents at the time, and that was this debate in the early days. This is like late 1800s, when the 1890s, when both Edison and Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse were essentially competitors, and there were others as well, but those are the two most important ones. And a guy named Nikola Tesla, who actually worked for both of them at one time or another. He first worked for Edison. He was unhappy. He was a genius, a technical genius, but not an easy guy to work with. And George Westinghouse adopted him after he quit working for for Edison and Tesla was basically the inventor of the idea of AC power in the electric motor. Although not the sole inventor, but he did some of the most important work. And he also was, by the way, an inventor of the idea of radio, I think. But that's another story.
Yes, that's correct. He invented it. Marconi got the credit, but Nikola Tesla invented it, yes. Yeah,
and he conceptualized it and actually built a prototype that worked in New York City, a short distance for signaling. But the big and they used the same phenomenon, by the way. That's why he was interested. He was interested in the effect of radiating AC power in different frequencies, and the concept of the electric motor. Whereas Edison was applying it entirely to lighting. He was most concerned with lighting, and the first power plants were built in the backyards of his investors, like J.P. Morgan in New York City, where he actually lit up their house, and that was the big deal of the time. And then the first power plants, the first AC power plant was actually built by Tesla and Westinghouse in Colorado. Here, not far from where I am in Boulder, Colorado, is built in Telluride, Colorado, is a hydro plant up on top of the mountain. And the reason they built it was they had to generate power. They'd cut down all the trees, so they couldn't burn any more wood to stoke the boilers that ran their winches for the mines. They were doing a lot of mining, and the only way they could get electricity then was to or they could use electric motor, this new invention called an electric motor, but they had to have power to it, and they built a little waterfall. There was a waterfall in Telluride, and they built a little power plant there, and they built about a 35 or 40 mile transmission line across the mountain to send the AC power across to run the mine. And then, but the next year they built a bigger one down in a town called Georgetown, Colorado, which was the first electric power grid that supplied power up and down the valley to other mines. And it was a combined hydro and steam plant. And then the biggest power, AC power plant. But anyway, this led to the big debate over whether AC was better than DC. Well, AC is better for motors. DC is great for lights, and it's safe. So there was pros and cons. Ironically, today we're seeing a comeback of DC because with a distributed generation that we're going to talk about next, you don't need to send the power as far as you did before. So AC becomes less efficient, and DC is actually more efficient. So, but anyway, they settled the war of the currents after a fierce PR battle over a couple of years, and as you mentioned, electrocuting elephants and ridiculous things like that, and even an electric chair. They ended up settling on AC power because they had to be able to transmit it. And so Edison gave up his DC and adopted AC, and they built a huge power plant up in Niagara Falls for New York, and that was the biggest, big transmission, and they transmitted the power, quite a distance from there. And then, but then I mentioned back in the 1930s, of course, hydro had this huge expansion and all that. But where we are today is this transformation that is being brought about by the reduction in cost, environmental factors, and of course the need for resilience. But let's talk about the cost first. There was an interesting, take a step back and look at how the solar got developed. In 1905, just as all this electricity was getting getting going, there was this scientist who did a study. They had just invented they discovered the electron. The electricity technology, like a lot of technologies, tends to precede the theoretical understanding of what it is. So we were able to use and apply electricity without really understanding what it was. And but they discovered that it was about electrons. The flow of electricity is the flow of electrons. And there was a scientist by the name of Albert Einstein who wrote a paper in 1905 saying that this electron could be stimulated by light. In other words, light was just packets of energy, which we call quanta of energy, or what we call today photons, that when those photons struck certain materials, they could dislodge electrons and create a flow of electricity, a solar battery, if you will. And he wrote that paper in 1905, and that was the basis of photovoltaics. The paper was about the photovoltaic effect. And but it wasn't until 1954 that Bell Labs was actually able to build one of these things. So that's 50 years it took. And then they started using them for a lot of things, but now it's another 70 years. We have mass production of these things, and they're cheaper than anything else. So that's how we got here. And it's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that the production economies have reached the level where solar is competitive with every other source of generation. So this is what the effect of this is. It's making the product is no longer the electricity. If you can put a solar panel on your house, then the product is not the electricity anymore. The product you're buying is the solar panels. It's the It's the equipment to make the power, which now, and you put battery with that, which Edison developed some of the first batteries. Edison did after he did the stuff he's most famous for, light bulbs and phonograph recording. He worked a lot on batteries, and he built some of the first electric cars. But he experimented with many battery technologies, and some of them are enjoying a renaissance today. Certain battery technologies that are gaining commercial traction. But that's the newest part right now. We get the economies of scale. What this did was destroy the economy of scale of centralized generation and distribution, the centralized power plants and their transmission. That economy of scale is now challenged by the fact that solar is just as cheap at a small scale as it is at a large scale. It's just the number of square inches or square feet of solar panel space that you have that counts, and it's a linear relationship. So there's no big economy in building giant solar farms. Solar and wind are actually both distributed resources, and they don't all concentrate in one place like a mineral deposit like coal or uranium. They're distributed all across the landscape. So to try to make them to fit them into this centralized architecture of this grid that we have developed doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. It's just as cheap to do it yourself, or getting that way anyway, going in that direction. So what we're seeing is a transformation that is just starting, and it challenges the economics of these utilities, and they don't know what to do. The investors aren't, going to keep getting the kind of returns they're getting, and their prices keep going up, their expenses, because they have all this, as you mentioned, all this these facilities and fancy equipment and highly paid people, and it won't support it anymore if people can go out and buy their own. The last thing all of these companies want is for you to be putting solar panels and batteries in your house.
You're absolutely right. They really did their best to try to shut me down with my ideas, and they had people. I think they had minions in the audience to try to shut me down. You're talking about, that's when I ran for the board of directors of the electric cooperative. I saw an electric car, and it was well over 100 years old. It was a 1906 electric car powered by an Edison battery. So, class, if you think that electric cars are new, that's not the case. is absolutely not the case. 1906 electric car. And then there was the Edison Battery Company. Yeah, and it was renamed to Exide, E-X-I-D-E, the battery company. And I'm broadcasting on Edison's technology, the nickel-iron battery. Dr. Tim Schoechle with us. And Dr. Schoechle, I just want to tell you, during the commercials, I ran down and looked at I left the studio, ran down to the first floor and checked the power generation. We're generating 2,200 watts. Now, it's 9:53 in the morning here in Missouri, so we don't have peak sun at this moment, but we've got enough electricity from our solar panels to run the broadcast studio with 4 computers. Got another computer running another part of the farmhouse where we're broadcasting from. I've got plenty of lights in the studio. It's not like I'm broadcasting in the dark. We're pumping water for a herd of cattle simultaneously. And Mrs. Finelli is running the clothes washing machine. And there's still a little electricity left over to charge the battery bank. So can it be done? Yes. And we still have only deployed a little less than half of the solar panels that we plan to install. I have them all here. I just need to fabricate the solar, the metal to support the solar panels. So absolutely, and by the time we're done, we'll have excess capacity that we could sell back. However, our electric cooperative wants to charge me $150 to install their equipment so I can sell them electricity. But it's really not sell them electricity. They will let me store our electricity over there on a rolling month. What I mean by that is, so if we have excess capacity, we can send it to their way. And then if we need some, we can get it back. But any excess that we send them that we don't use, they get to keep for free. So I'm not signing up for that.
Yeah,
if they wanted to buy it, yeah, what a deal. So if they wanted to be fair about it, and pay me for the electricity, I might consider it. But that's not what they want to do. They just want to use our electricity and let us store our electricity over there. But they'll sell us. Yeah, they'll sell it to us at about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're paying 5.4 cents for it. So there's a lot of overhead over there, and I guess
if very many people do what you're doing, then what happens to their business? They're in trouble.
Yeah. And one of the funny things when we built our house, we built it very energy efficiently, and we have foam insulation and 2x6 walls, and our walls are a foot thick. 6 inches of stone and then 6 inches of framing. And so when they first installed the power cables underground, they came out the next month and they said they wanted to see what's going on. They kept coming out, month after month, checking the connections, looking at the meter, trying to figure out how we were getting by with using so little electricity. And so I think they were thinking that we were stealing electricity, but they couldn't figure out how. And it was just simply we weren't wasting it. We were very, very judicious with our with the electricity that was coming to us because we were paying for it. But you bring up so many really, really good points. Where do you think we're going? Where do you think the ultimate answer is?
Well, that's a real exciting question to answer. Of course, I look in the crystal ball. I'm no guarantee I'm right, but this is what I think. This transformation we talked about is basically making making the product is no longer, as you used the term earlier, the product is no longer the electricity. It's equipment to make it yourself, and the efficiency that goes with that. So that's the new product, and so where does this transformation go? Well, when you combine the things you're doing, as you described, with another new concept, which we will get into in a future session, is the idea of communicating with your neighbors and with the rest of the world. It's optical fiber and the idea of transactive energy, the ability to trade power with your neighbors and share it within your community, and the use of high-speed fiber optic communication to enable that to work efficiently. That's where we're headed, I think. The new energy economy is based on a new energy community.
Dr. Shealy, what's the best way to get in touch with you and learn what your work is all about?
Well, I have a website which is gettingsmarteraboutthesmartgrid.org. That's all one word. Getting smarter about the smartgrid.org.
Getting
you can send me an email through there.
Getting smarter about the smartgrid.org. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I'm delighted to be broadcasting today with Glen Parnham, International Health. His website, ihsite.com, ihsite.com. Phone number 480-429-0021. You want that phone number because I'm sure you're going to want to call him for a free consultation. Welcome, Glen Parnham.
Well, thank you, brother. What an interesting, first 12 days of the new year is going on right now. So, very, very busy doing consultations, free consultations, 8 to 10 hours a day. And, of course, the topic that I'm getting lots of calls on all over the country is this so-called flu. And I don't know how bad it is out by you. Now, we're in Arizona, so we're West Coast. But literally, every hospital in Arizona, in Nevada, California, all the way up the coast, the hospitals are full. The emergency rooms, okay, and because we have nice weather here in Arizona, it's been 75. It was 80 the other day. But they have so many people coming to the ER that they're locking the doors, setting up triage tents out on the property of the hospitals to house these people in. Because this year, and they call it the H3N2, they have to call it something. And the Center for Disease Control, which, by the way, if your listeners have wisdom and have listened before, the Center for Disease Control is a private, for-profit corporation. They're listed on Dun & Bradstreet. They are licensed by the U.S. government, but most people that I ask, if they know about the CDC, well, they think it's a government organization. Nothing could be further from the truth. They own the patent on the Ebola virus. Isn't that interesting? They make literally fortunes pushing their toxic vaccines, and even they have admitted this year, anybody who took the so-called flu vaccine is making the flu worse. The flu pills that they have, which they're running out of out here, because they're still pushing them, even though it does not touch this H3N2. And they say, well, and that was around the 4, Vince. So it's bad. I'm getting calls all day, every day about it. And the good news is you don't have to rely on going to the hospital. It's not going to do you any good anyway. What are they going to give you? They're actually running out of IV bags. There's a shortage, because a lot of people become dehydrated when they get what is called the flu. And we could go into all sorts of hypothetical situations. I call it the chemtrail flu. Okay, they're spraying it on us, but that's a whole other story. The good news is people can do something about it without having to subject themselves to the toxic flu vaccine that even the CDC admits is maybe 10% effective, but it's actually making people worse. And then the Tamiflu, or whatever they want to call it, which they're running out of, which doesn't do any good. So, and it's now in 46 states. If you can believe the media, and I try to get it from all sources, because one of my specialties as the research director here is infectious diseases. And, we're in trouble. And people cannot take this lightly, because if it gets into the lungs, if it really gets a foothold in the lungs, it's already killing lots of people, even healthy young people, because they say the H3N2 this year is is much more dangerous for young people and for older people, okay? We've had children die out here in Arizona, where my sister lives in Dallas County in Texas. There are already over 20 people dead, and literally thousands and thousands infected. So what do your listeners need to do? One, you have to be very careful. If you go out in public, do not touch any, with your hand. Always have a barrier between your hand and a handrail, a doorknob, a grocery cart handle, anything that somebody could have coughed into their hands and touched, okay? And it's like yellow alert time. You've got to be cautious, all right? If you have children going to school, they're walking into a Petri dish every day. You don't know. And the teachers, I feel sorry for the teachers, okay, because they have to go, and they have no idea what the sanitation is like at the homes of these children, and then they get it, and they take it, and they spread it. You've got to be careful. If you walk into a grocery store, because a lot of the grocery stores are still giving flu shots or the flu mist up the sinuses, if you walk into a grocery store and they're doing that, get the hell out of the store, and here's why. Because when they get that, the shot or the flu mist especially, and they start coughing and hacking, well, and it's a live virus, okay, in those vaccinations and that, it will go up into the air conditioning heating system of the store, so you're walking around breathing flu-infested air, okay? That's why, and that's one of the reasons it's so close to being a pandemic. And mainstream media, yak, get your vaccine. Well, that's funny. The CDC says they're not working this year, and they actually make things worse, but they're still, and still pushing it because of the advertising dollars. So people have to be careful. Okay, now here's the good news. We've had a product for years called Super Silver. It's a nanoparticle of silver. We have two different strengths, 40 part per million and a 200 part per million. They have been tested on every form of bacteria, okay, and viruses. The cold and flu is a virus, and fungus, yeast, and candida that normally travel with it, okay? It's a product that people need to have in stock and keep taking it until the end of the so-called flu season. And it started early this year. It started about a month and a half, 2 months ahead of time. We still have 2 or 3 months of this left. Okay, so the Super Silver, absolutely proven, okay, to knock it out. Then they need to be taking about 10,000 IU a day of a high-quality vitamin D3 with the K vitamins in it. We carry that, but there's a lot of places that, they have vitamin D3 because, like a lot of the country doesn't have sunshine. Well, that also helps the immune system. But at least 10,000 IU a day. If they're taking 5,000, they need to double it. Okay. The other thing is, where does the immune system start? And where does it come from in the human body? The gut. And that's why probiotics, and unfortunately most of the probiotics, and it goes by different names. Good bacteria, flora, probiotics. Most of them on the marketplace are they're a joke, because with probiotics, two things determine their effectiveness and their strength. One, the number of families, and this is always listed on the label. It's a federal law. So like our Flora 14 is just that, 14 different families. And then the strength of probiotics are determined by something that's also on the label. They will either abbreviate it, CFU, and it stands for colony forming units. We have a 20 billion, a 50 billion, and a 200 billion. You've got to keep your digestive flora built up. Okay, that's where the immune system comes from. That's where most of the feel-good hormone serotonin is manufactured and transferred to the brain. But this is nothing to play around with, because if you go back in history, 100 years ago is when we had that, that terrible flu that killed, I'm seeing an article here. It was called the Spanish flu. Was it from Spain? Who knows? But it infected 500 million people and killed an estimated 100 million. And this new flu, and they're saying that there's a couple of them out there. The Australian flu, all right. There's one from France. There's a Japanese flu. We see, that has me convinced, okay, that it's man-made, all right, and that, I personally believe they're spraying it on us in the chemtrails, but, there's no way to know for sure. We know what the problem is, and we know the problem is, and I'm starting to see the words epidemic and close to pandemic, because if this gets out of control, and you've got to be careful, because if it gets deep into your lungs, that can, okay, and that's what's killing young, healthy people, is it gets into the lungs and they can't breathe. So there are ways around it, okay. Elderberry, which I think it goes by, one of the brand names is called Sambucol. It was invented over in Israel, but it's very good to knock out the flu virus, okay. Turmeric, all right. I mean, all these things build the immune system, all right, so it's imperative. Iodine, liquid iodine under the tongue. But the important thing is you don't get complacent. And this isn't about fear. We're not trying to spread fear. This is nothing to play around with, because I'm talking to people, they're calling me all day, every day, okay, just so sick, and it comes on very quickly, so I tell them, silver, okay, is very important because that's broad spectrum, but it's just important. And, of course, eating good, staying away from sugar. Sugar really whacks the immune system. Okay, I heard this scientific friend of mine talking about one of the reasons it started so early was all the partying during the holiday season. Well, and there's a lot of sugar involved in the holiday treat, so I hear the music.
Yeah, Glenn, it's very interesting that you've mentioned sugar. I've got a comment about that when we come back. Glen Parnham's with us, ihsite.com, ihsite.com. Glen Parnham's with us, International Health. You can find him on the internet, also at usaprepares.com. Just click on the instructors tab and you'll find Glen Parnham right there, and it'll take you a link that'll take you right to his site. Glenn, you were talking about sunshine, and you were talking about sugar, and I was listening very carefully to what you were saying, and it just occurred to me that, you know how so many seniors seem to die around Christmas time, and for years I've been trying to figure out, what is it about Christmas time? Why do they end up dying? And I think this is the answer, and I'd love to hear your comment. So the seniors don't get out as much because the weather's so cold, and a lot of places there's snow and ice, and they don't want to fall and break their hips, so they stay inside. They have the lack of sunshine. They have the increased indoor air pollution in their homes. They don't get the sun, and they're eating sugar, and bam, you put those three together. And do you think that's part of the reason why there are more deaths around Christmas time of seniors than probably any other time of the year? Well,
yeah, of course. And this year, I've been hearing some of the scientists and getting emails saying that the flu, and again, I use that term loosely, whatever it is, okay, really got a foothold, and it started, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's normally when people, and even if they watch their diet the rest of the year, during the holiday times, a lot of times they'll fall off the wagon, whatever expression you want to use, and they'll consume more of the treats and the sugar. Eating a product with raw sugar in it, the white processed sugar, okay, is deadly. In fact, the definition of sugar, of what it does in the human body, and if you look up the word poison in a dictionary, they almost match entirely. The sugar is toxic, and the immune system suffers suffers greatly. Then if you add on to that alcohol of any kind, which immediately, I mean, that's like drinking pure sugar, liquid sugar, because it turns into sugar when it hits the body. So all of a sudden, the human body, gets inundated with sugar and alcohol, and the immune systems are weakened anyway because of what people are eating. If they eat non-organic animal products, and that's not just the flesh. That's any combination of milk, eggs, cheese, cottage cheese, yogurt, ice cream, or butter. If they don't come from a certified organic herd, what do they pump into the animals that you end up eating when you consume those products? Estrogen growth hormones and antibiotics. Antibiotics destroy the good gut flora, which is where about 80% of your own defense system comes from. So, around the holiday time, and you have a lot of reasons, if people have been very, very sick, they tend to hold on until Christmas comes, and then a lot of them just kind of, say, all right, I've been sick, it's time for me to die, and they just, and they just give up. But as far as the physical health, absolutely, what goes on, during the holiday seasons with the overconsumption of pretty toxic crap, the cakes and the brownies and, all that kind of stuff, and drinking, absolutely, all right? And that's one reason, as I said, in hearing some of my research scientist friends have been talking about that. And then you have less sunshine. And now, even here in Arizona, where it's been unbelievably beautiful, the sun is lower in the sky, so even being outside, I mean, it was 80 degrees. I was out on my patio, all right, but you don't get as much D3 production, during what they call the winter times, even if you're in sun. And then the other parts of the country, there's virtually no sun at all. That's why it's imperative, to have a good vitamin D3, whole food vitamin D3, and always take it. It's got to have the K vitamins in it to make sure that it breaks down right. But that will help the system of your body, because we can't keep from being exposed to the flu. If you go to work and you work with other people, you're going to breathe the air. If you go to school, the children are going to be exposed. I hear the music. We'll be back.
Yeah, and if you go shopping at the supermarkets or the drugstore, and you're accosted by people sitting at these tables telling you get your flu shot right there. It's quick, it's easy, it's almost free. Sometimes it is free. Yeah, it's like they're dispensing disease. We'll be right back. Glen Parnham's with us. Let me give you the phone number if you'd like to call for a free consultation. 480-429-0021. 480-429-0021. And class, if you call that number, you may get a recording, the same recording that I get when I try to call Glen Parnham, because he's really busy. He's on the phone a lot. No kidding. Glen, I want to share something with you, and then there's a reason why I'm saying this. And I'll tell you what it is in just a second. So there was this cough syrup commercial that I heard on the radio a couple decades ago. And it was about Buckley's cough syrup. And the commercial would say, Buckley's, it tastes awful, and it works. And then they'd also say, we're number one, but we taste like number two. I mean, these guys had a very interesting commercial. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is I know some individuals who base whether they will take supplements on taste. So, for example, if it tastes good, they'll take the supplements. If it's something that you drink, if it doesn't taste according to what they want it to taste like, they won't take it. Now, the reason I've mentioned all this is some people who have not consumed your super silver may have some preconceived mindset about what it may taste like. Can you tell us what your super silver tastes like and how you recommend using it? Okay, could you do those two things, please?
Well, yeah, and we have two strengths. See, everything to do about silver, liquid silver products, and we also have a gel for any skin condition that you rub on the skin, we have silver lozenges. They're like cough drops with the silver in it. But the 40 part per million tastes like water. All right, it's a nanoparticle of silver. See, the old term, colloidal silver, is a very generic term. That simply means it's silver particles suspended in water. Well, and there's 50,000 different websites who claim to sell what is known as silver. The product with most of it is it's just it doesn't stay in suspension well. There's no medical studies, okay? And being that I'm the research director and have been for 30 years, and I get calls all the time, every month, from different companies. Oh, you need to carry our products. They're wonderful. And my pat answer for 25 years has been, send me the independent clinical studies. If you don't have them, don't waste my time or yours. I'm not, see, because 99% of the vitamin industry has been bought out in the last 10 years by the pharmaceutical cartel, and they've taken anything that was whole food and good for you and turned it into synthetic crap. Well, the same thing about silver, okay? And the technology that got a patent on it, instead of just a regular silver molecule, it turns it into a nano silver molecule, very, very small molecule. It's absorbed very rapidly through the lining of the cheek when you drink it, you know, and you swish it around. You can gargle with it if you feel a sore throat coming on. It tastes like water, all right? And our 200 part per million, which comes in a 4-ounce spray bottle, it's got a little taste, but it still essentially tastes like water. There's really not a bad taste about it at all, okay? And it's very effective. So, I mean, I've never had anybody say, I don't like what it tastes. I said, it tastes like water. You know, that's essentially what it is. Well, okay, with the nanoparticles of silver, and they're suspended there. And the biggest thing, because I could buy any product I want. Why do we have the nanoparticle? Because there's like 55 medical studies, and that can be seen on ihsite.com. And see, the reason I want people to call me and that I don't charge for consultations, and I do the free consultations 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't care what disease they've been told they have, okay? And doctors are great for trauma. You know, you have a heart attack or a stroke or a broken bone, you're not going to go to a chiropractor. But listening to a doctor about wellness, please, you might as well call your plumber and schedule brain surgery. They don't know a damn thing about wellness, okay? All they know how to do and have to tell you need this drug. If they don't prescribe the drugs, they can lose their medical license. So, and the silver is so effective. There are so many studies showing that there is no disease, no infectious disease, whether or not it's a bacteria, whether or not it's a virus, whether or not it's a fungus, yeast, and candida, that can live in the presence of a high-quality nano-silver particle. And that's why you've got hospitals now, okay, who are having a major problem with the MRSA, the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and C. difficile, which is the number one killer of senior citizens in the hospital. But they're switching over. You know, they have metal. They have silver in socks, and they're and in the garments there that they give people to wear in the hospital, because silver is God's antimicrobial product, and they haven't found anything that can live in the presence of it. That's why it is so important to keep your levels up, and if you feel something coming on, and you can't overdose with it, that's one of the great things, but if a young child, okay, got into the 16-ounce bottle of 40 parts per million, and because it tastes like water, if they drank the whole thing, there would be no negative effects. It doesn't even disrupt the good gut flora. They've done major testing, because a lot of the old colloidal silvers, if you take those silvers, they'll also kill your good gut bacteria. The nanoparticle of silver does not touch that, okay? So, and it is so effective, all right, on this flu this year, because it's been tested against all these different flu viruses out there, these different ones. It's even been tested, and again, the mainstream media, you're not hearing a thing about this pandemic that has started. It started on the island off the east coast of Africa called Madagascar. It's now spread all through Africa. It's not only the bubonic plague that you have to physically be bitten by a flea or a tick, okay, but riding along with it, because when that mutates, it becomes the pneumonic plague, which is like pneumonia, spread like the flu. And then now I'm getting emails from some of the missionary groups that I support, because you're not hearing this in the controlled media. It's carrying along with it a hemorrhagic fever. That means you bleed out of every orifice. It's killing some villages in like half a day, in 12 hours' time. Everybody in the village is just bleeding out. Gee, are you hearing any of that on mainstream media? No, and it simply takes somebody getting onto an airplane. And if you have to get on an airplane and fly somewhere, you better take some of the super silver with you in a spray bottle and keep spraying up your sinuses or into your mouth, because the air on airplanes is recirculated. And if you have a 2-hour airplane flight, and all it takes is one person on that flight to have some infectious disease, whether or not it's the flu or the bubonic plague or whatever out there is plaguing mankind, and everybody in that plane has been exposed to it. So that's why it is, you can protect yourself. You need to keep the body's own defense system up. That's the vitamin D3 with the K2, the good gut bacteria. Okay, and before the show we mentioned turmeric. Very good, as long as it's a high-quality turmeric. Iodine. Iodine also kills, viruses and bacteria. And that liquid iodine under the tongue is very important for the immune system. And, and you might have some people say, well, I don't want to do all those things. Well, then don't complain if you get sick. And if you get sick, I have people calling me up and say, I wish I had listened to you. I'm so sick I can't even work and I can't hardly move. I said, well, I told you weeks ago what you needed to do, and as they started to do it, then it shortened the period of time they were sick. But you've got to be extremely careful this year, because you don't want it to get a foothold, especially in the lungs. And that's why I say anybody who already has problems like with asthma, okay? And the best thing to do with our Super Silver 40 is if you have a nebulizer. And if you start to get upper respiratory, you can nebulize the 40 part per million right into your lungs, okay? And you'll probably end up coughing up some pretty ugly black stuff, okay? And if you don't have a nebulizer, then you can spray it in your mouth as you breathe deep and suck it as deep as you can into upper respiratory. But the important thing is, and again, the foundational stuff, good pure water. The purest water you can get, squeeze some lemon or lime, whatever your taste preference is, into the water that you're drinking, because that helps alkalize it a little bit. And the lemon juice or the lime juice is filled with minerals, okay? Make sure that you're taking super nutrition, and you eat the very best that you can, okay? Because I do consultations with multimillionaires, and I do them with people who are on social, disability, where they don't have much money. And I tell them all the same thing. Do the best you can with the resources that you have. Resources means availability in your community for the best organic food that you can eat. Try not to put any GMO foods or anything into your body. And then, what your budget is. Just do the best you can, and the rest you leave up to God, okay? And just understand a lot of these things that are happening, for my brothers and sisters in Christ out there, read Matthew 24. We're right in the middle of it, where it says, wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places, and pestilence. Pestilence is man-made. That's not spread by God himself. It's man-made stuff. That's, all this stuff going on in Africa with the bubonic plague and pneumonic plague and all of that. There is a germ warfare lab in Africa, and isn't it amazing? All these things seem to start, Ebola and Zika. Well, it came out of Africa. Gee, I wonder why. And don't be naive. Well, they wouldn't do that on purpose. The hell they wouldn't. It's going on in the chemtrails and everything else. electromagnetic frequency is just ripping apart the DNA of the body and the immune system. So you've got to be cautious and just be aware of what's going on. That's why when they call me, okay, I can go over the symptoms and the drugs they're on and help them get better.
Glen Parnham and I will be right back. Final segment coming up. USA Prepares. Glen Parnham's number 480-429-0021. Glen Parnham, I have your super silver here at the farm, and let me tell you what I do with it. I take the silver and I put it in a glass nebulizer, and I found one on eBay, and this is a vintage glass nebulizer. I just checked eBay and I looked at all of the DeVilbiss, DeVilbiss nebulizers, and I looked for the kind I have. They do not have one. Not one is listed, but it was about $20. It's all glass except for the pump bulb, which is kind of a rubberized plastic, and it will last forever if you don't drop it. And I put the super silver in there, and I spray it and inhale it. I spray it 10 times. It's a fine atomized mist. I inhale it, hold my breath. I do that about 5 times a day. Is that what you would recommend? Is that the recommended way, or
Absolutely.
Do you have a better way?
Yeah, anybody who already has lung problems, whether or not it's asthma. Asthma is a fungal infection of the lining of the lungs, and we know super silver will kill the fungus. But yeah, if they start to feel the tightness in the chest, and that's one of the symptoms of the flu this year, absolutely imperative that, if they have a nebulizer, use it, okay? Because the one that I've recommended for years is called Omron. It's the only one that can run on batteries when the power goes off, not if it goes off, okay? Mm-hmm. But, yeah, that you're doing it exactly right, okay? Now, I know we only have a couple of minutes. I do have to quickly mention to people, please keep up, on the information about CBD oil, okay? And like another show we'll spend more time on it. But the CBD oil industry is just exploding with research. If they go to getthebestcbdoil.com, they'll see the one that we carry is the first independently third-party researched. And it virtually eliminates every disease known to medical science. And it's a phenomenal. So with what's going on right now in the world, of course, you've got to be very careful of the flu and of getting that. But for overall health, please check out the information about CBD. It's going to absolutely change medical science as we know it, and it's going to be coming to a head this year because I've been on conference calls with lawyers who say they are going to challenge that ridiculous FDA disclaimer, this product has never been shown to cure or treat any diseases. There's 20,000-plus medical studies on CBD about what it does. The research has been going on for 70 years. Okay, so just and that's why when they call me at 480-429-0021, we'll go over what they're taking, the symptoms that they want to get rid of, and we'll get them better. That's my promise to them. And I don't charge for the consultation. So just have them call me, and you're doing everything exactly right with the, with the nebulizer and the silver. So just be just be careful out there, brother.
Yeah, let's see if I do everything right with the CBD oil.
Yep.
I use 2 pumps 3 times a day of your CBD oil, Glen Parnham.
Yeah.
Am I doing that right?
Yeah, and that was the first one we carried. We have another one now because we have 3 different strengths of it. But yeah, the CBD oil does the most marvelous things in the body, and there's so much research on it. And unfortunately, the marketplace is filled with crap products out there, but they're going to get put out of business anyway. By not getting tested, or the FDA is going to come after them. The FDA tested 70 different CBD company products. 66 of them were mislabeled because it's the wild, wild west out there. You've got to go with one that's been independently tested to make sure it's non-GMO and it's organic and doesn't have any of the toxic heavy metals. So, yeah, the one you've got is the first one we carried. It's a good product, okay, and it
what
does
is the one
amazing things.
Which of your products is the one that you recommend most?
Well, and the one we carry now from Enter Health Botanicals has 3 different strengths on it: 250 milligrams, 500, and 1,000. And there's some other ones coming out because the billions of dollars flowing into the industry is attracting research scientists of great quality. So you're going to see competition in the marketplace, high-quality products, and that. So I'll keep you posted on all of that, brother.
Glen Parnham, thank you so much for being with us, class. ihsite.com. ihsite.com. Telephone number 480-429-0021. Do I consume these products? Absolutely. The silver and the CBD oil.